Game day is finally here for the Arizona Coyotes on the road to face the Pittsburgh Penguins. We got a lot to get to on this first official game day portion for the third season of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlock right beside me. On today's episode of Locked On Coyotes, I want to thank everyone for making this show your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. I just said this is the third season of Locked On Coyotes. I just realized it's actually the fourth. It's my third season with Locked On Coyotes.
And my second.
And Carl's second. What a great time it is. We are glad to be with you all as we get ready for another Arizona Coyotes season, even though we are ready for another tank year.
Yeah. I just wrote the first game preview on Five for Howling, and it was one of those things where I always want to talk about the excitement of a new season because it's a very exciting time. It's great to be able to watch hockey again. But there's no denying that the Coyotes are going to be absolutely horrible again this year.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not going to make things too much easier, starting on the road, starting a pretty long road trip. I think they're not going to be back home for a couple games until 2 weeks from now?
The 28th, so over 2 weeks from now, it's going to be the home opener against the Winnipeg Jets. They will be playing 20 of their first 24 games on the road.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely brutal, so prepare for it. But we got a game today. Arizona Coyotes and Pittsburgh Penguins. You said you wrote the initial preview. No, what are your initial thoughts about this game?
My initial thoughts are it's going to be great to see Clayton Keller return and be back on the ice. And that's probably the only bright spot that we have. Pittsburgh Penguins made a couple of changes to their defensive core. They still have solid players in Crosby and Malkin. They got a couple players coming up. I do not like the Coyotes' chances for this one, especially since they lost all their preseason games.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. Especially because here's the interesting thing to me, and obviously I don't consider Pittsburgh to be a good team anymore, but they're a team that's trending down, but they're not bad yet.
Yeah, they are kind of at that stage where they are consistently either making the playoffs or possibly a wild card team, but they're not the upper echelon. I think that was kind of one of the things that came about with the talk about whether or not they resign Malkin. Is this really in the best long-term interest of the team, or should they start, I don't know, a rebuild? Should they do something? But they're still leaps and bounds better than the Coyotes.
Absolutely. I mean, the Coyotes, you look at the roster and it's just does this team really belong with a lot of this talent? I hate to say it. I mean, I really do. But I'm not gonna get I hate to say that alongside the fact that we're talking about a team that does have Clayton Keller, but Nick Schmaltz have some pretty players.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, the Coyotes have, a solid top line that's going to get a lot more attention this year than it did last year. I think for the second time in his career, people underestimated Clayton Keller. That is no longer going to be the case. But beyond that, it's a lot of I guess you could maybe form a decent third line out of these players, but not really too much beyond that. It's not going to be good. Now, the Coyotes roster is full of some younger players like Jack McBain, Barrett Hayton, uh, who you hope to see improve over the next couple of years, and then some solid players like Lawson Krause, Nick Ritchie, um, and as you mentioned, Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz. Like that's just not enough. And I think when you look at the blue line, it's also not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. I mean, that's all part of being a team that's, you know, built to essentially try to get the first overall pick again.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of a team that is built to facilitate getting draft picks. I think is kind of one of the ways to look at it. Like because the Coyotes are very keen on taking a player like a Zach Cassian who isn't necessarily going to do too much, but getting a pick with him. And that kind of leads to a team being constructed like the Coyotes. Um, it is, I think, funny that they are not even guaranteed to be the worst team this league or this season, though. Like looking at the Coyotes roster as it is, it's bad, but there's maybe like a couple other teams that finish below them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In just a moment, we're going to get on to some of the starting to the starting lineup. Go through who's starting for the Arizona Coyotes, what's on the line, to break things down, give our thoughts about it, and then we're also going to give our predictions, brought to you by Bet Online, in just a moment. But first, a word from Carl.
So I do have a message from our friends at Bet Online because betonline.net is your number one source for football betting information this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. You can find the latest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf, and hockey, the sport that we're about to start watching this season. Head over to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so now let's get to the starting lineup, Carl. Posted this. Craig Morgan, obviously paying attention to the morning skate in Pittsburgh, so he's got he's got his finger on the pulse, of course. So here's the starting lineup for forwards for the Arizona Coyotes. Keller, Boyd, and Schmaltz once again at that top line. I guess no surprise there, as we talked about before. Ritchie, Bukestad, Michelli on the second, Krause, Hayton third, and Fisher on the third. Liam O'Brien, Jack McBain, and Zach Cassian on the fourth.
Yep. Do you want to talk about that or do the defensive pairings first?
Let's go ahead and let's go finish it off, I guess. Okay. Defensive pairings: Mosier and Stetcher on the top, Gothisbehere and Brown at 2, Mayo and Timmins at 3, with the starting goaltender as Karel Vegemelka.
So I gotta say that fourth line is extremely heavy. O'Brien, McBain, and Cassian. That's 3 guys I would not want to meet on the ice. But also definitely not the most skilled line. So I can see that going very badly if they are put up against the wrong line of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm thinking they're going to get used pretty sparingly.
Yeah, I think that line is gonna be really interesting. That fourth line, I think there's got to be a name, a funny name for that line, especially with Cassian and O'Brien right there.
Yeah,
especially with Cassian and O'Brien.
Yeah, and you get the McBain potential. He's pretty nice. I don't know. We will. Do you think we're going to see a lot of that line? Like, do you think O'Brien is going to play like between 50 and 60 games this year?
It's hard to say. It really is hard to say.
Yeah.
Like I mean, we saw him like not play that much last year, but like he still. I mean, he still showed up to quite a few games, but like obviously injury kind of also played into effect.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I think definitely stands out is the lack of Dylan Guenther.
Yeah, I was going to mention that it does stand out. Dylan Guenther, not projected to start in this game. Obviously, things can change. There can be a game time decision before the official lineup card is submitted by the coaches. But based off our projections, yeah, it's really interesting that from Morning Skate that he wasn't there.
Uh, I do feel like the Coyotes, like their first three opponents, because after this they're playing Boston and Tampa Bay. Like those are, or no, Boston and Toronto. Sorry, those are three pretty solid teams. Like maybe they start them next week against the Montreal Canadiens, like a softer competition. Um, I'm not sure. I don't think that this is going to be a situation where they just like keep him around for no reason. I think he's going to play. I think he's going to get to his 9 games relatively quickly, but not really a sense in like throwing him right to the Wolves right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a discussion that probably also having with Andre Tourigny, and he's like, okay, like you made the starting roster, but you still need this to be in the starting lineup.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
essentially, right? He's like, all right, you're here, but I need this much more from you to make a game.
Yeah, I mean, Gunther is not a player that's anticipated to be on the team for the full season,
No,
so he is constantly going to prove himself. Like there's no sense in giving up right now.
absolutely, absolutely. Looking at the defense, though, actually, no. Before that, obviously, Matthias Michelli on the second line,
Yeah,
loving it, loving it.
yeah. Michelli, Richie, that could be an interesting combination. Unfortunately, I haven't seen Bukestad play enough, so it'll be cool to see what he could bring out. Um, of all of the lines, it feels like that second line is going to be the least consistent line that the Coyotes have.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of moving parts,
Yeah,
because I mean, I guess just because of new players coming in and out, because the third line is is like we know those people, we know like okay, that's where like it looks like it fits there. Kraus, Hayton, and Fisher. It's like okay, I like it. I like
I mean, I do see Hayton eventually moving up to be the top line center, but that's probably like a couple months away. Boyd and Keller and Schmaltz just had so much chemistry last season. Like,
you
don't
can't.
mess with that.
No, you don't take it. Like especially of how they ended the year. Like you don't want to take it away
Yeah, but Hayton is definitely the more skilled center, so I think he's going to claim his spot sooner or later.
sooner than later. Like I think they will uh, check it out and see in practices as much as they
Yeah,
can
I
because
think by at least February he is going to be full time there, but that's still like 4 months off.
yeah, absolutely. But we'll keep an eye out and see how things play out with those lines. But again, anyways, let's get to those defensive pairs once again. I can talk about the taking a look at some of these surprises, things that like. I like seeing Mosier, Carl,
Mhm.
and the top pair.
That's a really interesting one. Unfortunately, like the defensive pairings, it's like three people who were pretty well established last season and three people who weren't. Stetcher and Brown were recent additions. Timmins was hurt and missed most of the season. But Mosier definitely seems like of those three, probably the one you would put on the top line. He's got a lot of confidence. He's got a lot of, swagger. It'll be interesting to see what he could do because he's going to have to match up against some of the toughest competition. And that's like, eh.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, like Mosier impressed, right? He's been impressive since he came up from Tucson. It's just like, now is this really test of how it can translate.
Yeah.
And for being the top pair, like, dude, like I don't know about decision, but I like it. I'm for it.
Yeah, I would maybe put Gostisbehere in the top pair. I will say, like, the Coyotes lines and pairings. First of all, these are unofficial from Craig Morgan, watching the practice skate. But I'm reminded of the time that Clayton Keller and Nick Schmaltz were put on the fourth line under Tocchet, and they still played the same amount of minutes. They were just the fourth line. Like, the Coyotes have always been pretty fluid with what their lines mean.
Yeah, I mean the Tonka era was very weird in how lines worked. It's a little bit more consistent, I think it seemed like in the Torreni era so far,
Yeah,
right? It actually made a little bit more sense.
but if you're looking at these three pairings, like, how do you rank them in terms of like?
I mean, it's not. I don't think it's even necessarily a ranking on skill when it comes to these pairs. It's I think it's it's. I mean, of course, in some ways it is because you have to trust this person. You have to trust the top pairing to go up against like the some of the best forwards in the world.
Yeah,
But at the same time, I think it's really you know based off what's going on in practice, and I haven't been to um, any of them yet this year, which I'm planning on going to more practices this year, barring any difference in work schedules. But I want to pay attention to those and I think that will make a huge difference.
yeah. I should note that looks like Yuso Velimeki is the one with visa issues, so he will not be able to play. That makes a little bit more sense. I think we initially, before the show, thought Ingram had the problem. He did not. It's good old Yuso. I think him coming in could definitely stabilize this blue line in a way that it's not. I do not have much confidence in these three pairings, if I'm being completely honest.
Oh yeah, no, that absolutely. Like the confidence level is low. I'm just looking at it in the perspective of like, oh, this is a really interesting decision. I'm for it because I'm like, you know what? I liked what I saw from Mosier previously, and I like, you know, I want to see more from Gossip. I think keeping him at the second pair is like healthy for him because I think that's what
Yeah.
he was like most of last year. Um,
The second pair defenseman role seems to work really well for a player like Gostisbehere because you're not getting the top competition, so you're like able to like just kind of like feed off the lower competition if you're an offensive guy like Gostisbehere. I
mhm.
think that plays out really well. Um, Honestly, the pairing that I think could potentially be the biggest for the Coyotes moving forward, maybe Mayo and Timmins, just because like we don't know what Timmins is going to be, but he is a highly touted prospect. He could, very well make a difference in this league. Mayo, I think, was a bit more defensive. He was kind of like the AHL player to come up who I think had the most stabilizing presence. No offense to Mosier, I thought he definitely brought a lot, but I have a feeling we're going to see a lot of Mayo Timmins in the next couple games.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's going to be really interesting. I'm excited to see. I hope to be able to see more from Timmins this year
Hopefully, yeah,
because we didn't get that last year, and we're just like, oh no.
yeah, absolutely with you 100% on that one.
Absolutely. And then finally goaltender once as I mentioned, Kurovic Moka getting his first official start of the season.
Hmm.
Excited to see what that's going to look like. What has he been working on? Are we going to see vintage Kurovic Moka from what we saw some of it last year, where he had saved like 47 saves? Um, let's hope he doesn't have to do that, really. But
I mean, for this game, it seems likely.
oh,
But he didn't do great in preseason, which has me a bit concerned. But I do think that he's a solid enough player. He can, you know, if he could be a part of this Coyotes rebuild, and he should have the shot. He has been with the team the longest. Like the team just acquired goaltender Connor Ingram, so no reason to put him in when he doesn't know the system, doesn't know the players in front of him, doesn't necessarily have that. So give Vemelka the shot, and knock on wood, he has a good game.
yep, we will absolutely hope on that. In just a moment, we are going to talk about the uh, predictions. We're going to give our predictions of this game from our friends at Bet Online. First, I want to let you guys know that throughout this season, on a select number of games, we are going to be doing live post-game coverage of these games. I know we did some last year. Carl and I are going to go back to doing these again. Um, as again on select games, but be sure to pay attention to when those games are all season long. But let's go ahead and get on to our predictions, courtesy of our friends at Bet Online. Looking at the odds, Carl, we are looking at it right now. Arizona Coyotes, 1.5 underdogs at plus 130, plus 326. So minus 375 for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So pretty heavy favorites. Total points, 6.5.
6.5 seems high, especially for the first game. Uh, but that does seem reasonable, if I'm being fair. Ah, why don't you give your prediction first? You're the better.
I am the better. So I'm interested to see how this one's going to work. Like I said, I'm hopeful for the Coyotes to show that give us some glimpse into what we are to expect. Obviously, with the absence of Dylan Gunther and a couple others, like I am just like still a little skeptical on what this team's going to look like for this first game. Pittsburgh Penguins, they're still a fringe playoff team. Coyotes a bottom team. I don't think the Coyotes can cover that 1.5. I think it's going to be a 4-2 Pittsburgh Penguins game. So don't let it cover, and it's going to be under.
See, I was gonna go 4-2 Pittsburgh too. I think the Coyotes are gonna come out early. I think they're gonna maybe get an early goal, but Pittsburgh is gonna retake control of it and just kind of establish themselves. I'm always hesitant of something we saw a lot last year: the second period collapse, the third period collapse. So I don't think the Coyotes are going to be completely shut out, but I think they're going to not be able to overcome themselves. Let me say that.
That makes sense. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Because like you said, both of us predicted 4-2, and it's only the start of the season, right? So we could I think the start of the season, Carl, I think is the hardest when it comes to bettors because we don't. A lot of us haven't seen very many games yet because preseason isn't available to everybody.
Yep.
Practices aren't available to everybody, so we don't know the true strength of these teams until they hit the ice for the first time this season. And this is the first time both of these teams, teams are going to be hitting the ice this season.
Yeah. Also, just preseason isn't available for everyone. It's also not the best indicator of success.
Yeah,
People aren't necessarily trying as much. The
I
star
mean,
players aren't playing as much. You really need to play the games before you actually know.
let's compare to last year, Carl, where the Coyotes only lost like one preseason game.
I mean, that sounds right. I don't pay attention because preseason is pretty meaningless. Um, it's it's definitely like the Coyotes shouldn't have confidence going into this game, but that's also like kind of the moment where you surprise your opponent. Like you come out with more energy than they thought. Like you take a commanding lead early on. Like good things can happen. Like nobody knows what this Coyotes team is going to be. Nobody knows like what the defense is going to be, and every single player on the ice has something to prove.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One more thing I do want to talk about, from our, regarding Bet Online, Carl, is, it was, we as a network have been making videos about, over under for total points, right?
Yeah,
I want to get your opinion on the Coyotes total, because I talked about it on our game to game video, our Locked On Now video, but it's uh, so the Coyotes are, of course, the tied for the worst
sure.
on projections, 65.5
Okay.
points.
Do you want me to say whether or not I think they'll be over or under?
Yes.
I think under. I think they're going to be under 65 and a half. I could see 64.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing too. Because I was also taking into consideration what happened last year, right? They finished at 57 points last year,
Yeah.
which was bad. I mean, they're not going to be that bad this year, but they're still going to be bad because they still want to get the, you know, that tank hard for Bedard sweepstakes.
Yeah.
And it's where I was looking at like 62, 63.
Yeah. I mean, I do think the Coyotes could probably have gotten more points if Clayton Keller hadn't been hurt at the end of the year, if Lawson Cross hadn't been hurt. Like the Coyotes missed so much time due to injuries. But I also see this as a team that's going to be getting worse as the deadline approaches, as they ship out players like Jacob Chikrin, Shane Gostisbehere, whoever has a pulse and another team wants to take a fly on in order to work hard to get the rebuild going. Probably we're going to start to see some like decent improvement next season. And then the season after that, hopefully it continues to improve. But I don't think they're going to make that big of a jump between year one of the rebuild and now year two.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any final thoughts about this game you want to share before we close things off?
I'm really excited to see meaningful hockey again. So throughout the year, I'm just gonna, anytime it seems rough, I'm gonna just remember that, and I think fans should too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. If you like what you heard, don't forget to leave a review. Like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. Don't forget to interact with us on social media. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Locked On Coyotes, on Instagram at Locked On Coyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leano. Carl Pavlak is at Carl Pavlak FFH. Interact with us, ask a question you might have, we might answer right back, or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Thanks again, everyone, for listening to today's episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.